Rosa had been sitting on the same corner for 3 hours, watching people walk by like she was invisible. The morning sun was getting warmer, but the concrete beneath her was still cold from the night before. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders and looked down at her hands. They were shaking, not just from the cold, but from hunger. Her stomach had been empty since yesterday morning. The last thing she ate was half a sandwich someone threw in the trash outside the coffee shop. She had waited until nobody was looking before she picked it out, trying to keep whatever dignity she had left. The cardboard sign next to her was getting soft from the morning dew. She had written "Please help. Anything would mean the world" in blue pen 2 days ago. The words were starting to fade, just like she felt she was fading away from the world around her. A woman in a business suit walked past, talking loudly on her phone about some meeting. Rosa looked up hopefully, but the woman's eyes looked right through her, as if she wasn't even there. This happened dozens of times every day. Sometimes Rosa wondered if she had actually become invisible, like in those movies her daughter used to watch. Her daughter. Rosa closed her eyes and tried not to think about Lucy. It hurt too much to remember the little girl with pigtails who used to run into her arms after school. That was before everything fell apart, before the divorce that left her with nothing, before she lost her job at the clothing store because she missed too many days taking care of her sick mother, before the bills piled up so high she couldn't see over them. A teenage boy walked by with his friends, and one of them pointed at her and laughed. Rosa felt her cheeks burn with shame. She wanted to tell them that she used to be someone important. She used to read bedtime stories and pack school lunches and help with homework. She used to have a name that people knew and a place where she belonged. But now she was just the homeless woman on 5th Street, the one people crossed the road to avoid. An older man in a baseball cap stopped in front of her. Rosa's heart jumped with hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe someone would finally see her as a real person instead of just a problem to walk around. "Get a job," the man muttered, shaking his head as he walked away. Rosa felt tears start to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying wouldn't help anything. She had learned that lesson the hard way over the past 2 years living on these streets. The morning crowd was getting thicker now. People hurrying to work, students rushing to class, parents pushing strollers. All of them had somewhere to go, someone waiting for them, a purpose that got them out of bed each morning. Rosa used to be one of them. She used to check her watch and worry about being late. Now time moved differently. Days blended together like watercolors in the rain. A mother walked by holding her little girl's hand. The child stopped and stared at Rosa with wide, curious eyes. Children were different from adults. They still saw people as people, no matter what they looked like or where they slept at night. "Mommy, why is that lady sitting on the ground?" the little girl asked in a voice full of genuine concern. The mother quickly pulled her daughter along. "Don't stare, honey. It's not polite." Rosa managed a small smile and waved at the little girl, who waved back before disappearing into the crowd. For just a moment, Rosa felt human again. The sun was getting higher now, and Rosa knew she needed to find some shade soon. The concrete was heating up, and her old sneakers had holes that let the hot pavement burn her feet. She had learned to move around during the day, following the shadows like a sunflower follows the light. She thought about the shelter downtown, but it was full most nights, and during the day they made everyone leave. The rules were complicated and changed often. Rosa had tried to follow them all, but sometimes it felt like the system was designed to keep people like her moving, never letting them rest long enough to figure out how to climb back up. A delivery truck rumbled by, filling the air with diesel fumes. Rosa covered her nose with her sleeve and coughed. Her chest had been hurting lately, a deep ache that reminded her she wasn't young anymore. At 58, her body was wearing out faster than it should. The streets were hard on everyone, but they were especially cruel to women her age. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was creased and faded, but she could still make out the faces of her family from better times. Her mother, who had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. her daughter Lucy, gap-toothed and grinning in her school picture, and herself, younger and hopeful, believing that things would always get better if you just worked hard enough. Rosa put the photo back in her pocket, right next to her heart. It was the only thing she had left from her old life, and she protected it like a treasure. The lunch crowd would start soon, and Rosa knew this was her best chance to get something to eat. People were more generous when their own stomachs were full. She straightened her sign and tried to look as presentable as possible. Sometimes appearance made all the difference between getting help and getting ignored. But deep down, Rosa wasn't really asking for money or food, though she desperately needed both. What she was really begging for was much simpler and much harder to give. She was asking to be seen, to be remembered, to matter to another human being, even if just for a moment. She was asking to exist in a world that had forgotten her name. It was Tuesday morning, and Rosa was in her usual spot when something different happened. A man in a white coat stopped walking. Most people who stopped just dropped coins and kept moving. But this man actually looked at her, really looked at her, like she was a person worth seeing. Dr. Michael Chen was running late for his clinic. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way Rosa sat with her back straight despite everything. Or maybe it was the small book she held in her hands. Most people would have missed it. But Michael noticed things. It was what made him a good doctor. "What are you reading?" he asked gently, crouching down to her level instead of towering over her. Rosa looked up in surprise. Nobody had asked her a question like that in months. Her voice came out rough from not using it much. "It's poetry," she said, holding up the thin book with pages falling out. "I found it in a donation box behind the library." Michael smiled. "I love poetry too." "What's your favorite poem in there?" Rosa's eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. She carefully turned the pages until she found what she was looking for. This one about hope being like a bird that never stops singing, even when everything is dark. The bird keeps singing. "That's a beautiful one," Michael said, and Rosa could tell he really meant it. "I'm Michael. By the way, I work at the free clinic down the street." "I'm Rosa," she replied, surprised by how good it felt to say her own name out loud. "Thank you for stopping. Most people don't." Michael looked at his watch and then back at Rosa. "Have you eaten anything today?" Rosa shook her head. She had learned not to lie about being hungry. There was no point in pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. "There's a little diner across the street," Michael said. "Would you like to get some breakfast? My treat." Rosa couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked down at her dirty clothes and tried to smooth down her hair. "I don't think they'll let me in looking like this." "Don't worry about that," Michael said kindly. "You look fine to me." The waitress at the diner gave them a strange look when they walked in together. But Michael didn't seem to notice or care. He led Rosa to a booth by the window and handed her a menu like she was any other customer. Rosa stared at all the choices, overwhelmed. It had been so long since she got to choose what to eat, instead of just being grateful for whatever she could find. "I don't know what to pick," she admitted. "What sounds good to you?" Michael asked. "Everything," Rosa said with a small laugh. "But maybe just some eggs and toast?" "I don't want to cost you too much." Michael ordered eggs, toast, bacon, orange juice, and coffee for Rosa, plus pancakes on the side. "You're too thin," he said matter-of-factly. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" Rosa had to think about it. "Maybe a week ago. Someone gave me a sandwich from the church." As they waited for the food, Michael asked Rosa about herself, not in the way social workers did, with forms and questions that made her feel like a case file. He asked like he genuinely wanted to know her story. Rosa told him about her daughter Lucy, who was grown up now and lived far away. She talked about her job at the clothing store, how she used to help customers find the perfect outfit for special occasions. She mentioned her mother, who had taught her to read when she was little and always said books were treasures that nobody could take away from you. "How did you end up here?" Michael asked gently. Rosa's story came out slowly, like water through a crack in a dam. The divorce that left her with nothing. Her mother getting sick and needing expensive care. losing her job because she missed too many days, the medical bills that piled up even after her mother passed away, the eviction notice that came on a cold February morning. I kept thinking someone would help. Rosa said, stirring sugar into her coffee. I applied for assistance programs, went to charity offices, called every number they gave me, but there were always more forms, more requirements, more hoops to jump through. And when you don't have an address or a phone that works all the time, it's impossible to keep up with everything. Michael listened without interrupting, without judging, without offering quick solutions to complicated problems. He just listened. And Rosa realized how long it had been since anyone had done that. The food arrived. And Rosa tried to eat slowly, but it was hard. Everything tasted so good after days of being hungry. The eggs were perfectly cooked, the toast was buttery, and the orange juice was fresh and cold. This is the best meal I've had in 2 years, Rosa said, wiping tears from her eyes. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You don't need to thank me, Michael said. Everyone deserves a good breakfast. They talked about poetry while Rosa ate. Michael had read many of the same poets, and they discussed their favorite verses. Rosa felt her mind waking up after being asleep for so long. She had forgotten how good it felt to have a real conversation about something other than survival. I used to be smart, Rosa said suddenly. I used to read 2 books a week and help my daughter with her homework. Sometimes I worry that living like this has made me stupid. You're not stupid, Michael said firmly. You're surviving something incredibly difficult. That takes intelligence and strength that most people will never understand. When they finished eating, Michael walked Rosa back to her corner. I come by here every Tuesday morning on my way to work, he said. Maybe we could have breakfast again next week. Rosa couldn't speak for a moment. She just nodded, afraid that if she tried to talk, she would start crying right there on the sidewalk. Same time next Tuesday, Michael asked. I'll be here, Rosa whispered. As Michael walked away, Rosa sat back down on her corner. But everything felt different. She looked at the same street, the same buildings, the same people walking by, but the world seemed brighter somehow. Someone had seen her. Someone had listened to her story and hadn't walked away. For the first time in months, Rosa felt like she might still be human after all. 3 months had passed since that first breakfast, and Rosa's Tuesday mornings had become something magical. Every week, she and Michael would sit in the same booth at the diner, sharing stories and warm food. But more than that, they were becoming real friends. Rosa had started to look forward to Mondays, just because it meant Tuesday was coming. She would wash her face extra carefully at the public restroom and try to comb her hair with her fingers. It wasn't much, but it made her feel more like the person she used to be. One Tuesday, Michael arrived looking thoughtful. Rosa, I've been wondering something, he said as they settled into their usual spot. You mentioned you used to work in retail. Have you tried looking for work since you've been on the streets? Rosa stirred her coffee and sighed. I've tried, but it's impossible. Every job application asks for an address, and when I write homeless or leave it blank, they throw it away. Even the places that say they want to help don't really understand how hard it is. What do you mean? Michael asked. Well, last month I went to this job center. The lady there was nice enough, but she kept asking me questions I couldn't answer. Do you have a phone where employers can reach you? No, mine got stolen weeks ago. Do you have work clothes for interviews? No, everything I own got taken when I couldn't pay for storage. Do you have transportation to get to work? No, I walk everywhere because I don't have money for a bus fare. Rosa took a sip of her coffee and continued. Then she asked if I had identification. My wallet got stolen my second week on the streets. To get new ID, I need a birth certificate. To get a birth certificate, I need to pay a fee and have a mailing address. To get a mailing address, I need a home. It's like being stuck in a circle that never ends. Michael listened carefully, and Rosa could see him thinking, what if I could help with some of those things? I mean, you could use the clinic as a mailing address, and maybe we could work together to get your documents replaced. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. You would do that for me? Of course, Michael said simply, everyone deserves a chance to get back on their feet. Over the next few weeks, Michael became more than a friend. He became Rose's partner in rebuilding her life. He helped her fill out forms for a new social security card and birth certificate. He let her use the clinic's address for mail. When she got nervous about phone calls to government offices, he would sit with her and help translate the confusing language. The hardest part was waiting. Everything took weeks or months. Rosa had forgotten how slow the system moved when you needed help quickly. But Michael was patient, and slowly, piece by piece, Rosa started to feel like a real person again. One day, Michael came to breakfast with exciting news. The public library is looking for volunteers for their adult reading program. He said, they need someone to help people who are learning to read or improving their reading skills. I immediately thought of you. Rosa shook her head. Michael, I don't have any teaching experience, and look at me. I'm homeless. They won't want someone like me working with people. Rosa, you're one of the smartest people I know. You love books, you're patient and kind, and you understand what it's like to struggle. Those are exactly the qualities they need. It took 2 weeks of Michael's gentle encouragement before Rosa agreed to at least meet with the volunteer coordinator. The library was a beautiful old building with tall windows and the smell of books everywhere. Rosa felt at home the moment she walked in. The coordinator, Mrs. Williams, was a kind woman in her 60s who didn't seem to care that Rosa was homeless. She was more interested in Rosa's love of reading and her desire to help others. We have students from all walks of life, Mrs. Williams explained. Some are adults who never learned to read as children. Others are people learning English as their second language. A few are folks who just want to get better at reading so they can help their own children with homework. Rosa's first student was a man named Carlos who worked at jobs and was trying to get his GED. He was embarrassed about his reading level, but Rosa understood that feeling perfectly. She knew what it was like to feel ashamed of things that weren't really your fault. There's no shame in learning, Rosa told him during their first session. The only shame would be in giving up. Carlos smiled at that, and Rosa knew she had found something special. For the first time in years, she felt useful again. She felt like she had something valuable to offer the world. Word spread quickly about the new volunteer who was so patient and encouraging. Soon Rosa was working with 3 different students, and all of them were making progress. Mrs. Williams was so impressed that she asked Rosa if she would consider applying for a part-time paid position that was opening up. But I'm homeless, Rosa reminded her. That's just where you sleep, Mrs. Williams said kindly. It's not who you are. Through the library program, Rosa met other people who cared about helping those in need. There was Dr. Patricia, a retired teacher who ran a support group for women experiencing hard times. There was Mr. Johnson, who managed a transitional housing program. And there was Linda, a social worker who actually understood how to navigate the system instead of just adding more paperwork. Slowly, Rosa began to see that there were good people everywhere, people who wanted to help if they just knew how. Michael had been the first to see her as a person worth saving, but he wasn't the last. The best part was watching her students succeed. When Carlos passed his GED exam, he hugged Rosa and said, "You changed my life." But Rosa knew the truth. They had changed each other's lives. As autumn turned to winter, Rosa realized something amazing had happened. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living again. She had purpose, friends, and hope for the future. And it all started with one person who decided to stop walking and start caring. 8 months had passed since Rosa first met Michael, and everything in her life had changed. She now had a small studio apartment through the transitional housing program, a part-time job at the library, and for the first time in years, she felt like herself again. But something else was happening too, something she hadn't expected. Rosa found herself thinking about Michael even when it wasn't Tuesday. She would see something funny during her day and wish she could share it with him right away instead of waiting for their weekly breakfast. When she read a beautiful poem, his was the first face that came to mind. At first, she told herself it was just gratitude. Michael had saved her life in so many ways. Of course she cared about him deeply, but as the weeks went by, Rosa realized her feelings were becoming something more complicated and wonderful. Michael seemed to be going through the same thing. Their Tuesday breakfast had started lasting longer and longer. Sometimes they would sit in the diner for 2 hours, talking about everything from books to dreams to silly memories from their childhoods. Michael would find excuses to stop by the library during the week, always with some small reason that they both knew wasn't the real reason. One evening, Rosa was organizing books when Michael appeared in the poetry section. "I was in the neighborhood," he said with a smile that made Rosa's heart skip. "The clinic is 6 blocks away." Rosa laughed. "That's not really the neighborhood, okay?" "You caught me," Michael said, looking a little nervous. "I wanted to see you." "Is that terrible?" Rosa felt warmth spread through her chest. "No," she said softly. "It's not terrible at all." They walked to the small park across from the library and sat on a bench under the streetlights. It was the same park where Rosa used to sleep sometimes when the shelter was full, but now it felt completely different. Now it felt like a place where beautiful things could happen. "Rosa, I need to tell you something," Michael said, his voice gentle but serious. "These past few months, getting to know you, watching you rebuild your life, seeing your strength and kindness, you've become so important to me." Rosa's heart was beating so fast she was sure Michael could hear it. "You're important to me too," she whispered. "I know this might sound crazy," Michael continued, "but I think I'm falling in love with you, not because I want to save you or because I feel sorry for you. You don't need saving anymore. I love you because of who you are, your laugh, your wisdom, the way you care about people, how you never gave up even when everything was against you." Rosa felt tears rolling down her cheeks, but they were happy tears this time. "I love you too," she said. "I was afraid to even think it, but I do. I love you so much it scares me." Michael reached over and took her hand. "What are you scared of?" "I'm scared you'll realize I'm too damaged," Rosa said honestly. "I'm scared that someone as good as you deserves better than someone who used to be homeless. I'm scared that this is too good to be true." Michael turned to face her completely. "Rosa, listen to me. Your past doesn't define you. The fact that you survived what you survived, that you kept your kindness and hope through all of that, that makes you stronger than most people will ever be. You're not damaged. You're remarkable." Over the next few months, Rosa and Michael's relationship grew slowly and carefully. They both understood that love built on friendship and respect was different from the passionate but fragile love of young people. This was deeper, more solid, like a house built on strong foundation. Michael met Rosa's daughter Lucy when she came to visit. Lucy had felt guilty about not being able to help her mother during the hard times, but Rosa assured her that sometimes life is just bigger than what any one person can handle. Lucy was amazed to see her mother happy and confident again, and she liked Michael immediately. "He looks at you the way Dad used to look at you when I was little," Lucy told her mother privately. Before everything got complicated, Rosa introduced Michael to her students at the library. Carlos, who had become like a son to her, shook Michael's hand and said, "Thank you for taking care of our Rosa. She saved my life, you know." "She saved mine too," Michael replied, and Rosa knew he meant it. On a warm spring evening, exactly 1 year after they first met, Michael and Rosa were feeding pigeons in their favorite park. Rosa was laughing at a story Michael was telling about a patient who tried to diagnose himself using the internet when Michael suddenly got quiet. "Rosa," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I have something to ask you." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. "I know we're not young anymore, and I know we've both been through a lot, but I can't imagine spending the rest of my life without you. Will you marry me?" Rosa looked at the ring, then at Michael's hopeful face, then at the park where she used to sleep alone and afraid. Now she was here with the man she loved, surrounded by the life they had built together. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course, yes." When Michael slipped the ring onto her finger, Rosa thought about how strange Life was. A year ago, she had been begging for crumbs and getting nothing. Now she had everything she had ever really wanted: love, purpose, and someone who saw her worth even when she couldn't see it herself. As they kissed under the street lights, Rosa realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that begin when you think your story is over. 2 years after their wedding, Rosa and Michael had become the kind of couple that gave other people hope. Their love story had spread through their community like ripples in a pond, inspiring others to look more carefully at the people around them who might need a helping hand. Their wedding had been small but perfect. It took place in the community center, where Rosa now coordinated volunteer programs. All her students from the library were there, along with the staff who had become like family. Mrs. Williams from the library walked Rosa down the aisle, and Carlos gave a speech that made everyone cry happy tears. Rosa taught me that it's never too late to start over, he had said. And now she's showing us that it's never too late to find love either. But Rosa and Michael's story didn't end with their happy ending. Instead, it became the beginning of something much bigger. It started when people began asking them how they could help others the way Michael had helped Rosa. At first, it was just friends and co-workers who wanted to make a difference. But word spread, and soon Rosa and Michael were getting calls from all over the city. "We want to help, but we don't know how," people would say. "What should we do?" Rosa and Michael realized that many people had good hearts, but didn't know how to turn their compassion into action. So they started something they called the Tuesday Project, named after their weekly breakfast that had started everything. The idea was simple. Instead of just giving money or food to people experiencing homelessness, volunteers would build relationships. They would sit and talk, learn names and stories, and help with the complicated process of getting back on their feet. "Everyone needs more than just a sandwich," Rosa would tell new volunteers. "They need someone to see them as a person, not just a problem." Rosa became the heart of the program. Who better to teach people about homelessness than someone who had lived through it? She would meet with new volunteers and share her story, helping them understand the real challenges people faced. "The hardest part isn't being hungry or cold," she would explain. "The hardest part is feeling invisible, like you don't matter to anyone in the world." When Michael stopped and talked to me that first day, he gave me something more valuable than food. He gave me back my humanity. The Tuesday Project grew quickly. Within a year, they had 50 volunteers paired with 50 people living on the streets. The results were amazing. More than half of the people in the program found stable housing. Even more important, they found friendship and support that lasted long after they got back on their feet. Michael used his medical connections to make sure program participants could get health care. Rosa worked with the library system to expand literacy programs. Together, they created a network of services that actually worked because it treated people with dignity, instead of just processing them through a system. One of their biggest successes was a man named David who had been living under a bridge for 3 years. His volunteer, a teacher named Ms. Rodriguez, discovered that David had been an accountant before losing everything in a series of medical emergencies. With help navigating the system and getting his professional licenses renewed, David was back to work within 8 months. But it wasn't just the people receiving help who were changed by the program. The volunteers found their lives enriched in ways they never expected. "I thought I was helping Tom," said one volunteer about the man he had been paired with. "But Tom taught me more about resilience and gratitude than I ever taught him about job applications." Rosa often visited people who were still living on the streets, not as someone who had escaped to judge those left behind, but as someone who understood their struggle completely. She would sit on the same corners where she used to sit, talking to people who reminded her of her former self. "I know it feels hopeless right now," she would tell them. "I know it feels like nobody cares and nothing will ever change. But I'm here to tell you that's not true. Change is possible. You matter. Your story isn't over yet." Many of these conversations led to new participants in the Tuesday Project. Rosa had a gift for helping people believe in the possibility of something better, probably because she had lived through that journey herself. The program caught the attention of city officials and other organizations. Rosa and Michael were invited to speak at conferences and meetings, sharing their model with other cities. Rosa, who had once felt voiceless, now spoke in front of hundreds of people about the power of human connection. Systems and programs are important, she would say at these events, but they're not enough. What changes lives is when one person decides to really see another person and care about their story. 5 years after the Tuesday Project began, Rosa stood in the same spot where she used to sit begging for help. But now she was there for the program's anniversary celebration. The city had put up a small plaque recognizing the work they had done to help hundreds of people find housing, jobs, and hope. Rosa looked around at all the faces in the crowd. There was Carlos, now working as a counselor helping other people get their GEDs. There was David, the former accountant, who now volunteered his financial skills to help program participants manage their money. There was Mrs. Rodriguez, who had become one of their most dedicated volunteers, and there was Michael, standing beside her with the same kind smile that had changed her life that first Tuesday morning. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had walked past me that day?" Rosa asked him. Michael shook his head. "I don't think I could have walked past you. Something about you just drew me in. Maybe it was fate." Rosa smiled. "Maybe it was just one person deciding to care about another person. Maybe that's all it ever takes." As the celebration continued around them, Rosa thought about all the Tuesday mornings that had led to this moment. She thought about the people who had been helped, the volunteers who had discovered the joy of service, and the community that had learned to see homelessness not as someone else's problem, but as everyone's opportunity to make a difference. The girl who had once begged for crumbs and received nothing had not only found love, but had helped create a movement of love that touched hundreds of lives. And it all started with one person who decided to stop, to see, and to care. That, Rosa realized, was the most beautiful thing about love. It never stayed in just one place. It always found ways to spread, creating more love wherever it went.